Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journey, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2022. This brings us to that release, which has been designated by Criterion at spine number 1114. This is a work from 1939. The name of the filmmaker, the director, is Leo McCarey, and the name of the work is Love Affair. This is the work from 1939, and it has in its really splendid, exciting cast Irene Dunne and Charles Boyer, and it is, of course, from the great filmmaker Leo McCarey. This is the work from 1939, Love Affair. What an exciting release this is. This is a very exciting release indeed for a number of reasons. For example, the restoration work that went into the presentation of this film, as well as a number of supplements, and we will get to those discussion points a little bit later in this video. And of course, another great reason for the splendid release that is this particular one is the film itself. Love Affair from 1939 is one of those films. It's magical, it's special, it's sparkling like pink champagne. It sparkles, it dazzles, it delights, it charms, and it has this really lovely and natural feeling, organic feeling, sensibility about it with regard to the romantic elements, the comic elements, the dramatic elements that make for one heck of a time at the movies. This is a very entertaining, charming work with a sense of earnestness and a sense of real charm and sensibility that are timeless and utterly classic. The plot, I think, could be described in terms of, or the film could be described as a romantic comedy, a romantic drama. It has its doses of melodrama that always serve the emotion and character trajectories of the people that we meet along the way. And what is that plot, and who do we meet along the way? These are, of course, the characters of Terry and Michelle. These are the Irene Dunne character and the Charles Boyer character, respectively. And we understand that they are socialites, or I think the Criterion Collection describes them as being chic strangers. And they also are strangers who happen to meet a chance encounter aboard an ocean liner, a cruise ship ocean liner that is at the moment en route to New York City. And we also understand along the way, very early on, that in addition to, say, their socialite positionings, respectively, they also have their own backgrounds and sensibilities about who they are and what type of lives they wish to lead or not lead, as the case may be. And also we understand that upon their chance encounter and upon they getting to know each other a little bit more, and we getting to know them a little bit more along the way, we also understand that each of them has his or her own, say, plan or agenda with regard to plans for relationships with other people once the ship arrives at New York City. Now, this is where the complications of romance and chance encounters and circumstance begin, of course, because the characters here, the Irene Dunn character and the Charles Boyer character, they begin to like each other and very much like each other and are attracted to each other. And there's a chemistry in the air that is very romantic, very full of life, full of vigor and energy. And so herein lies the source material, as it were, for the title in question, Love Affair. And these two socialite strangers who happen to meet aboard this ocean liner do have a very strong romantic connection, despite what their lives will bring to them. And their separate diverging paths in this world, what will occur to them once the ship arrives in New York City. And so they formulate a plan to meet 6 months later aboard or atop the Empire State Building, and the idea being, of course, the keeping of this appointment sometime later in the future, and also the 6 month period in order for each of them to sort out certain details with respect to their lives respectively. For instance, maybe their current or ongoing relationships, how they might need to settle those aspects, or maybe to aspects of their own career and professional lives and status. Because after all, on the one hand, we meet these characters and they seem to be of a certain, say, class and high society living, as it were. But at the same time, we also understand that they are also working professionals in their own industry. In arts or music, respectively, and so we understand that during this period of in or after the ocean liner episode, we understand that they also want to be true to themselves and want to prove to themselves and maybe to the other that they can, quote unquote, make it on their own and prove themselves and prove their worth. And so this becomes also a wonderful, I think, added layer or dimension that is contributing very, very strongly to the emotional arc and dynamic that we see presented in Love Affair. But at the same time, there are, as I say, wonderful doses of drama and melodrama and romantic melodrama and chance coincidences or chance encounters or non-encounters, as the case may be. And once these situations and coincidences begin to level and accumulate, then we see how their relationship, the two main characters in question, how they are further tested, how they are further challenged, and maybe to the maybe without necessarily knowing what the other is going through at the same time. So this becomes yet another source of that romantic tension, that romantic spirit, and yes, the idea or the urging or the type of viewer response, as it were. We as viewers want them to succeed. We as viewers want them to get together. We as viewers want them to find happiness in this world, whatever the case may be. Now, as I say, the plot does present certain, shall we say, challenges or obstacles or coincidences or happenstance that could be said to be within the realm of the romantic drama, melodrama department. And again, in a wonderful, entertaining, and sparkling way. At the same time, or in parallel to that, we should also say that this is also a film that is very much integral with regard to how the characters are portrayed. These are flesh and blood characters, in a manner of speaking. These are characters that have a life and a soul to them. They might seem, maybe from a certain vantage point, to be well off, maybe financially from a certain perspective or a certain point of view, but that is not the end of the story for each of them, because as we were alluding to earlier, they are also given, or we also privy to their backgrounds, and they do have their own respective, say, challenges or struggles that might be related to financial connections or professional connections and the like, and to What I like about that background is it also provides us with the motivations, the inner workings, the motivations of these characters to try to achieve some kind of, say, personal success or personal goal or objective during, say, the period of time, the 6 months or so when they might be apart, but always wanting to dream ahead, look ahead beyond the horizon to that point in time one day where they might hopefully meet once again. The idea of the Empire State Building and the imagery that is iconic and also very romantic, plus the imagery of the ocean liner and the voyage and the strangers meeting randomly, as it seems. This also adds to the air of the mythic and romantic. But at the same time, with those broad brushstrokes, we do also have the individual spirit, the personal motivations, the strong sense of characterization that is also at play. So the broad brushstrokes that are brilliant and iconic and oh so romantic and very, very flowing with a type of a sense of fate and coincidence on the one hand, but at the same time, the individual, the persistence of the individual that is embodied by these two wonderfully depicted characters, Terry and Michelle, as portrayed by Irene Dunn and Charles Boyer in a fantastic, remarkable way. Their chemistry, too, by the way, their on-screen chemistry is very electric. It is so charming. It is witty. It is very approachable. And it is just very, very likable, too, as well. What I like, too, about Love Affair and the way that the plot unravels, too, I love how the plot always seems to be focusing primarily on these characters. Of course, there are external factors that might be at play, but it's always about the characters and how they are reacting to various externalities. And it's not the film doesn't focus on the externality per se or the external factors, but is always focusing on them and how they react and how they respond. And I love that. I really love that because it gives us, again, a sense of the intimacy and the emotional arc and the emotional scope and breadth of these characters. Once again, the emphasis on the personal and their own, the persistence of the individual in the context of this external broad landscape of romance and iconic landscapes, etc. So I really, really appreciate too the way in which the plot is structured, and it really gives a sense of great focus. And of course, along the way, we do see how these external factors, these maybe other characters that we meet, how how Terry or how Michelle, how they react or respond to them. Certain visits might be made to, say, family members or friends, etc., or close associates, etc., and how the characters react or respond. Maybe there is a sense of jealousy or a sense of maybe playful banter in the way in that in each of these characters respond to those external factors, or maybe there is a sense of how their response brings the two of them even closer together, and that makes for a great, a deep sense of involvement on the part of the viewer, and also it really drives home the just how well these two characters are with each other. And there's just, as I say, the on-screen chemistry is utterly delightful. And so we have here this really amazing work, and then brought together under the direction of Leo McCarey, who is able to pull together all these various components and parts. The performances, the decor, the use of iconic settings to further enhance the romantic and the intimate, and the broad brushstrokes, iconic nature of the sense of fate and external forces and coincidence and chance on the one hand, but at the same time the persistence of the individual on the other. And that makes for some really grand entertainment indeed, which is again further supported and enhanced by the application of music, song choice. There's some really famous song choices here as well that are referred to in some of the supplements, etc. And so this all comes together in this delightful, wonderful, pink champagne, bubbly, spirited, lively film from Leo McCarey from 1939. This is, of course, the film that is Love Affair. The Criterion Collection has released this film, the Leo McCarey work, Love Affair, 1939 work, at spine number 1114. And this is the Blu-ray edition. There's so much to celebrate, so much to talk about with regard to this release. It is a splendid, noteworthy example of the greatness of physical media in today's age. And one of the reasons for such, I think, assessment could be due to the restoration upon which this release is based. The restoration details are included, for example, in the leaflet handout, or the leaflet insert that is part of the release itself, and I've taken the liberty of removing it in advance. And inside it says, Love Affair is presented in its original aspect ratio of 1.37 to 1. This 4K restoration was undertaken by the Museum of Modern Art and Lobster Films at Lobster Films Laboratories in Paris, from a 35mm original nitrate print and a safety 35mm duplicate negative, both from the MoMA collection. And there is actually some information too about the restoration details and processes that is part of the supplements package, and we'll talk about that momentarily. Before we get to the supplements, however, we should emphasize that this restoration, it looks and feels and sounds incredibly vivid, incredibly crisp, and I think it's well worth noting too that up until recently, until this release in fact, the film Love Affair has not always been made available in, let's say, the highest quality conditions, let's put it that way. And so this is remarked upon in such restoration description about how there were many copies upon copies upon copies made and that were later relied upon for home media distribution. For many years, these would be the copies that would be relied upon for purposes of home media viewing until we have a great release like this. And I must say, from my vantage point, having seen the film only through, say, such quality versions prior to the Criterion release here in MoMA and Lobster Films, I must say that this is an eye-opener of a restoration presentation. I feel like I'm watching the film for the first time. It is a fresh and vivid and exciting representation of the work. It sounds great. It feels great. It feels like something brand new and fresh, and it's incredible, absolutely incredible. As I say, I have never seen the film. I've never been able to see the film in such high quality condition like I have been able to with this Criterion Blu-ray release. Again, based upon the MoMA and Lobster Films efforts here, which are stellar, absolutely stellar. So this is totally something to celebrate, not just in terms of a physical media release, but also in terms of the celebration or re-celebration of Leo McCarey's work and filmography in the context, or taking as an example of that great filmography, this film, Love Affair from 1939. So all in all, it is so worthwhile to celebrate, so worthwhile to mention. So that is the presentation, and I really, really hope that as many people get a chance to watch this particular release and the presentation, because as I say, you are in for a real treat indeed. And now let us go to the supplement section of this particular Criterion release. As we know, Criterion is always very strong when it comes to the additional supplemental materials, and here we have a nice selection of such materials, starting with a 23-minute or so discussion from 2021 with the great film scholar and historian and expert extraordinaire Farron Smith-Nemi. And here she is talking about the making of Love Affair and how she mentions the works of Leo McCarey, how this is a romantic film. She ranks it as being among her favorite in terms of romantic films, and she gives so many details, so many treats, so many insights and points of knowledge from her incredible wealth of information that she has as a film scholar and expert extraordinaire. And she speaks, for instance, about the wonderful, curious structure of the film, and about also the nature of the script and the story and how it came into being. She does mention the story, Mildred Cram and Leo McCarey having been credited with the story, and then the screenplay work. She mentions to the transformation or the synthesis or the genesis that led to the ultimate script or working materials that became the basis for the filming of Love Affair. So this is, I think, a fine example of this. And two, she mentions Leo McCarey and Leo McCarey's own background and how he had a very varied and wide-ranging wealth of experiences himself, working in terms of experience as an attorney, also as an amateur boxer, how he even attempted to become a songwriter at one point, and perhaps this might go towards how maybe sensitive and he might have been, or one can assume that he must have been, with regard to the use of music in the context of the film Love Affair. So this is, I think, a very great introduction into Leo McCarey and his background, leading to, say, the development of the story Love Affair, and also Leo McCarey's turning into or involvement in the film industry. And actually, there is some great details or some great examples of such early involvement, which we'll talk about when we get to some other supplements. And then this leads to a great discussion from Farron Smith-Nemi about his the trajectory of his career into the 1930s, and with great examples from this period of his career. Duck Soup is mentioned, Make Way for Tomorrow is mentioned, The Awful Truth is mentioned, and then, of course, Love Affair. And then she talks about the great performance by Irene Dunne here, and how Irene Dunne as Terry McKay, how she had a great kind of professional collaboration relationship with Leo McCarey, and how Irene Dunne also brought so much of herself and her talents and her great spirit as a multi-talented artist in her own right, in terms of her training and background as a singer, as a performer, and also how that, of course, led to some great character dimension points and singing points and performative points that are indeed part of the character of Terry that we see. And this is such a really crucial component in terms of that 6-month period and how we see her progress and develop in terms of her own, the character's professional background, and indeed how this could be linked to Irene Dunn's professional background in terms of her own artistic experience, and then going back to Leo McCarey and his own experiences in terms of music. So it's all coming together in this great, as I say, pink champagne cocktail mix that is Love Affair. And then, of course, we have the other great performance here, Charles Boyer, and there's a mentioning and talking about his background and his details leading up to his participation in a number of films, including, of course, Love Affair. And my goodness, what a stellar, solid performance this is. He has to portray, Charles Boyer does, he has to portray this type of socialite, almost playboy artist type of character, who is also very likable, very down-to-earth, who doesn't let his, say, socialite status get the better of him in terms of his own conception of himself. And we get so much of this in terms of how his character interacts with, say, other supporting characters that we meet along the way. And also it's grounded too by the great, I would say, down-to-earth and very approachable style and wit and screen presence that Charles Boyer brings to the table, to the proceedings. So this is, I think, another valuable, key, insightful, and essential aspect of what makes Love Affair so successful as it does. So this is a great further line of discussion and inquiry from Farron Smith-Nemi. And she does speak too about the style of Leo McCarey and the working methods that he seems to employ. And he also talks about, or she also talks about, the wonderful use of, say, camera movement and design. It has a sense of straightforwardness, but also a sense of capturing the landscape, capturing the iconic, but also never losing track of the personal details, the individual character persistence details, as it were. The cinematography of Rudolph Maté is credited here, and also his work, as Farron Smith-Nemi McNamee speaks of in terms of not only in the context of Love Affair, but also his work, for instance, with Dreyer. So here we have a great further insightful discussion from Ferenc McNamee on the cinematography and filmmaking component. And then also there are some issues too that she brings up in the context of censorship, contemporary censorship issues at the time, and how it was possible or not possible, depending on the circumstances and the timing of the filmmaking, to show romantic drama stories about couples or maybe people who make up a couple that is the focal point of the story, and say it is the idea of a relationship before marriage, and what is implied, what is suggested, the concept of sex before marriage would be a point of censorship sensitivity, uh, or sex outside of marriage. And this becomes an implied aspect of the very makeup and design of the characters themselves, because as we know, they're meeting on the ocean liner, their own personal backgrounds and character traits being revealed starting from very early on. We understand that they are both in their own ways single socialites who are also seemingly very social indeed in terms of, say, these sorts of relationship dynamics, including, of course, the suggestions that might be made vis-a-vis their own partners or their own couples at the time prior to them meeting for purposes of this film Love Affair. So these sorts of points, I think, are addressed so well and so, I think, so thoroughly by Ferenc McNamee, again, to remind us too, among other things, to remind us of the times in which this film was made, 1939, the late 1930s. And I mentioned too the use of music. There are some really lovely uses and examples of songs themselves, songs with some clever lyrics. Again, we also see the performance aspect of that as part of the decor of the film plot. So this is very important. 1939 and the type of dazzling iconic aspects of romantic films of the time, and pink champagne. It becomes a really nice motif, which we also see, by the way, when we talk about the Criterion collection. That I think it incorporates that motif really cleverly. And then also there's the film, the great film, An Affair to Remember, which comes several years later. And so there's a nice discussion about that film in the when compared to the earlier film Love Affair, and what might have drawn the filmmakers to attempt to create that particular film, again, in the basis or the backdrop of the earlier work, the 39 work. So all in all, this is, I think, a fabulous conversation from Ferenc McNamee, not to be missed, not to be. On the contrary, please watch this if you can. It is so worthwhile. Again, the discussion with Ferenc McNamee, approximately 23 minutes. And then that's not all, because we get next from Serge Bromberg from Lobster Films about the restoration. This is again described as being from 2021, approximately 5 minutes. And this is again speaking about the certain challenges or details or backdrop with regard to the handling of the source materials, the way in which this film, based on such source materials, was distributed upon release or after release, and how it had a very maybe what one might call, somewhat dubious existence in terms of copy upon copy upon copy for that form the bases for all the home media releases that occurred all the way up to very recently. And so based upon this situation, it might have seemed like a lost cause to try to attempt to restore a film like Love Affair. But then, of course, he also brings up the details about what led to the source materials becoming available for purposes of this restoration, including the key crucial detail of Leo McCarey and how it was his personal print that he had, which became part of the MoMA archive, and thus became, we understand, one of the key elemental sources for what became this new 4K digital restoration. So this is, I think, just a great reminder of just how important restoration work is for purposes of preservation, and also for purposes of memorializing these key works, which would otherwise run the risk of disappearing before our very eyes before we even know it. So, and not just preserving against this risk of disappearance, but also preserving it in a way that is so beautiful and so sharp and ripe and stellar, the way this restoration is in terms of the details and sounds and richness that are all covered. So, a great 5-minute discussion here about the restoration. So please check this out if you can. And then that's not all, because then we have short films. And these are 2 short films from Leo McCarey during the Hal Roach studio days. And these are all dealing with Charlie Chase. And the first is Looking for Sally, approximately 24 minutes. This is from 1925. And the next being Mighty Like a Moose from 1926. This is approximately 22 minutes. And I should point out, too, that the Criterion insert indicates in an acknowledgement note, restorations for Looking for Sally, 1925, and Mighty Like a Moose, 1926, courtesy of Lobster Films. And so these great films are included here. They have a really nice punch and style to them. There's this idea of comic romance, mistaken identity, comic humor scenarios that are set up with a nice build-up and then a punchline of sorts, and also a type of search or hunt or quest for some kind of emotional longing, or based upon some kind of emotional longing, seeking some kind of fulfillment or union or togetherness. And so it has these wonderful traits of a romantic comedy element to it, but also we see at the same time the hallmarks of the clever intelligence of the presentation of these setups. And they're very, very clever as well, and quite unique and very inventive and imaginative. So Looking for Sally, the 1925 work, and Mighty Like a Moose, a 1926 work. So you have these short films as well for a further exploration of the early filmography of Leo McCarey. And again, thematically and also in terms of tone and style and genre, we have arguably 2 films that are also maybe precursors, or at the very least thematic or spiritual connections to be had with this film Love Affair. So well done. So please check those out as well as you can, if you can. And then, last but not least, we have radio adaptations. One from 1940 and the second from 1942. And these are Lux Radio Theater radio productions produced by Cecil B. DeMille. The 1940 one is 49 minutes, and the 1942 one is 53 minutes. The 1940 production is April 1st with Irene Dunn and William Powell. And then the second one, the 1942 one, is described as being from July 6th. And again, this is with Irene Dunn and Charles Boyer. And so we have, again, radio adaptations are a wonderful treat. And it's wonderful to have these particular selections here. When you push the play button, for the first one, you'll get one sort of solid screenshot from the film, and it's held on that while you hear the audio. And there's another separate screenshot that is held when you press play for the 1942 radio production. So there are no, as far as I could tell, there are no chapter stops. It would have been nice. I always like radio plays when they're included as part of the supplement. I just only wish that Criterion, if it were possible, could maybe add chapter stops as well, especially for these longer, longer works. So it might be easier to find a place if for whatever reason one has to stop in the middle and then return at a later date. It would be nice to have chapter stops, but that's a very minor criticism. It is, of course, a wonderful thing to have these. Again, we see how the radio style works so well with this particular story. They are so engaging, so catchy, so witty and so energetic, and they follow the story so well. So it's really fun to see what the similarities are, what the sort of intonations of the voice, dialogue deliveries are, respectively, etc., etc. So that's another fun exercise, as well as being yet more sources of entertainment for the story, and also great reminders too of just how inherently and thoroughly entertaining and engaging this story of Love Affair is. So well done for being able to include these as far as a complete package is concerned. Now let us turn to the presentation or the actual release itself and the cover art design, as well as the insert, which I have alluded to earlier. So first of all, to this design, we have, of course, a representation using a still or shot or otherwise a depiction from what seems to be from the film directly. But I really like this too. We see that this is a very maybe a moment that has so many elements that are very significant to the plot and also to the idea or the myth that is love affair. So we have the duo here, our main characters here in a type of embrace. Also, there is something in the background too, which is also very important centerpiece or image, as well as a plot related location. And it's serving so many details. Plus, I love this font as well. It's very evocative, or a reminder of a type of Hollywood classical tradition that this film is certainly a great example of, etc. And we have this black and white motif, again, perhaps in keeping with the black and white photography that is the 1939 film. But I should point out that the pink motifs, the gold pink or pink gold motifs, are, of course, adorning parts of the package throughout, including the back here in this really nice way, as you can see. I'm sorry for the poor visibility of this video, the video quality. I hope you can understand. But we have the pink motif here, and when we open it up, we have we have this wonderful selection here. So as you can see, this is where the insert will be housed, and on this side here we have the disc itself. And I love that detail of the plate and the forks and knives and spoons, and then a little glass, what looks like a glass filled with what might be pink champagne. And so perhaps this idea of the pink and the golden hued pink is meant to suggest something of the pink champagne that is very much could be said to or argued to be a very nice and a very maybe important detail in terms of the plot and also the environment that we see as part of Love Affair. And indeed, this type of golden pink motif is included when we get to the insert itself, with also accompanied by certain shots from the film or meant to remind us of the film, etc. So this is, I think, overall a wonderful type of artistic or visual motif or collection of motifs that are combining together for purposes of this Criterion release. Well done indeed. Let me say that art directors are Sarah Habibi, Eric Skillman, designer Raphael Gironi. So well done for being able to capture this notion and capturing it in terms also of the very nice use of color design as well. I'm very much impressed by that. And then when we get to the insert as well, it's one of these fold-out inserts, and I've said it before, but let me say it again. I'm not a fan of the fold-out. I would much rather prefer to have the stapled booklet as a robust type of means by which one can have maybe one or more written materials, essays and the like. But that is still okay, because for purposes of this fold out, we have a great essay. It's called The Nearest Thing to Heaven by Megan McGurk. I love that title, by the way. It's a very important title as well. And it's a great title for purposes of this great essay. The essay is going into the context of Leo McCarey and 1930s cinema, Hollywood cinema, leading up to or setting the stage for what would become this wonderful output from that period, Love Affair. And then, of course, specific themes and notions and character developments, both in terms of plot-specific discussion and the like, that form a great backbone. With many wonderfully illustrative embellishments included in the written words here. The Nearest Thing to Heaven. Oh, I love that title very much, and I love this essay. So once again, we have a great essay from Criterion. So after you've seen the film, I would strongly suggest reading this great essay if and when you can. It's a wonderful thing. Also, I should point out too that of late, I've noticed maybe with other supplements, or I'm sorry, other Criterion releases, they've printed out the insert on a sort of thicker paper. Not this time. This time I sense it's the same or very similar type of a thin standard slightly laminated or laminated feeling type of paper. So it doesn't have the same thickness as, say, the insert for a recent release like Miller's Crossing, for example. But that's okay, as I say. I'm not a fan of the fold out, but having this with the great essay and the look and design and feel, etc., that is carried over in terms of the front cover design and back cover design, etc., it makes for, I think, an overall wonderful package. So this is the Blu-ray release of Love Affair. It might seem maybe like it would have been nice to have maybe some other supplements were it possible. Maybe if there was say, a commentary track. Farron Smith Nemi, I think, could have been a great candidate for providing a great commentary track for Love Affair. Of course, I would have loved to have seen more supplements of the like. But be that as it may, what we do get here is very eye-opening, very much a great maybe introduction into the works of Leo McCarey, or just generally speaking into the filmography and cinematic stylings of Leo McCarey that form a great discussion point for a further deep dive exploration and discussion and discovery with respect to this work, Love Affair. Once again, the Criterion Collection has released Love Affair at spy number 1114. Okay, my friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well. And please, please, please keep on watching a lot of great, great movies. Thank you so much, as always, for your time. I very, very much appreciate it. Stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.